Good morning, everyone. This is Eric, and we are going to get started here in just a little bit, just letting people pile into the room, and then we'll get started. Still got about 2 minutes, and then we'll get this started up. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see everybody's attending. This webinar is going to be on the value tab for NEOS Academy this month. So my name is Eric Hill. You're used to seeing me here as the face of the NEOS Academy. I have today with me a very special guest. My son, Devin Hill, is part of the training department here at Assembly, and he is volunteered or voluntold to come help me do this webinar. He's good at it, so that's why we invited him to come stay with us and enjoy this for the next hour, or at least 45 minutes to an hour. Please, if you have any questions or concerns, use the Q&A button down at the bottom. We will try our best to get to those questions. As we're going through, we will do our very best to answer everybody. If you don't get an answer immediately, please note we do see it and we will get to it. If there's too many questions, we will have to answer those questions afterwards. So what we'll do is we'll get the recording, we'll chop it up, edit it, put it together real good with the questions and those answers, and then we send that link to everybody that is in attendance today. So no worries, everybody's going to get a video of this recording. So if there's any questions or concerns or anything you need to reflect back on, you will get those. Hey, Mr. Nunez. And with no further ado, Devin.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So again, my name is Devin. I'm a trainer here at Assembly Software. I've been doing this for going on about 4 years now. But like he said, today we're going to be covering the value tab. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And you all should see my NEOS Today screen. Now, before we even get into it, just to discuss the value tab a little bit, essentially anything dealing with expenses that are on the case, bills, attorney's fees, settlement amounts, and those things, it's going to be stored in the value tab. So this will give you one central location where everything dealing with the money in the case is stored. All right. So we're going to go through how you guys are going to be able to customize these, set it up to meet your firm's needs, and the various ins and outs of tracking these expenses throughout the courses of your cases. All right. So to get started, the first thing that we'll need to do is make sure that we set up permissions for you and everybody in your firm. And we do have some very specific permissions here in our settings on the left-hand side. So you'll see in our settings, we have a section called permission groups. And within permission groups, we are going to look at the attorney role for today. All right. So don't worry, these permissions will be detailed in depth, what they do and how they all work. Today, what we're going to be focused on, like we said before, is going to be the value tab. All right. So this value tab permission right here is what's going to allow you and your users to put those case expenses, those medical bills, the settlement amounts and the attorney's fees and anything else into those cases. All right. So at the course of the case, you get a breakdown of, what the firm is owed for those case expenses, what needs to be paid out to those providers. And you'll see here we have 4 columns. So enabled, can add, can modify, and can delete. So we want to be able to see the value tab, add items in there, like we said, case expenses, medical bills, and those things. We can modify it, maybe add a reduction or a transaction to identify that, the firm paid that case expense. But we don't necessarily want to be able to delete those value items. Right. And just as a heads up, this is typically what we recommend or is what's considered best practice in NEOS. So we can see, we can add, we can modify, but not delete those value items. We typically reserve the delete permissions for the admins. All right. So now once we've associated the value permissions, there are some specific ones called special. Here at the top, you'll see special. And within here, there is one called turn off DTF creation. So that's a due to firm creation. You'll hear that referenced quite a bit throughout the trainings that you guys will be a part of. And that is essentially just recreating the case expenses that you guys have paid on behalf of your client. So just making sure that the firm is reimbursed for those. With this permission currently turned off like this, it means that that due to firm is automatically going to be created. All right. And don't worry, once we go through and actually create one, we will reference back to this whole DTF creation. And you also may have noticed when we came into this general permissions, we have accounting, but that is for QuickBooks. If you guys have QuickBooks, there is a dedicated session on that, and that will go through the accounting permissions. Okay. So once we have made the permissions for the value tab set for everybody, what we now need to do is make sure that our codes and those items are set up for us. So that way, when we go create a value entry, the items that we use or your firm uses will show up in the list. So we're still in our settings. And over here to the top right, we have this mini directory section or directory editor. Within this mini directories, we have a lot of standard fields that you will see throughout NEOS. For anybody that's coming from Needles, I'm sure you guys know what class codes are. Those kinds of things will be found in the mini directories. But what we're going to look at for now is going to be value codes, the very last item. And this is going to kind of help us understand what I've been saying. So case expenses, client disbursements, debt payments due to firm, fixed fees, all these various types of expenses that your firm may deal with throughout the course of your cases. Some pretty common ones, are going to be medical bills, case expenses, attorney's fees, and those things, right? Now, let's say that your firm doesn't use the word settle, you may use the word recovery. You are able to add any type of value code you want just by clicking add here at the top right. So this is tying into what we were saying before, the customization of NEOS and these codes to match what you want to see. Oh, if I can type on the right keyboard, sorry. So if I click recovery, we could say settlement. Oh, And then we have this type field. So the type really does tie into a different area of NEOS. And you can see attorney fees, case expenses, but it typically matches what it is. So you'll see settlement amount. And the reason I say that, it ties into invoices, but that ties into a LawPay integration. If your firm has LawPay, you guys will learn all about the invoices and how this type here comes into play. All right. Now, credit and debit, this is more so for QuickBooks. So when you guys are requesting your checks, this is going to determine if you're going to get a check request or a deposit request. All right. And there is that due to firm item that we were talking about. So to kind of bring it back to what we were saying before, we're going to create a case expense. We're going to create a transaction identifying that the firm has paid that case expense, whether it's filing fees or record fees, right? So when we identify that the firm has paid that, it's going to prompt us to create a due to firm entry. Right? And this right here is saying that if we put in a transaction for the settlement amount, do we want a due to firm entry to come up? In this situation, no. As you see, it's really only for case expenses or fines, something that you guys may pay on behalf of the client. You have two more fields here active, reference label 1 and reference label number 2. All right, active just means that you're actually going to be able to choose that when you create a value entry. And reference labels are two fields that you can rename to store the information that you want. So I know I've mentioned QuickBooks a couple times here today. If your firm doesn't use QuickBooks, but you still want to track like check numbers or invoice numbers, as you see here, you can rename those two fields for that value entry. But like we said, you can create your own custom value codes. Just make sure you click the blue save at the top right. All right. So now that we've got our permissions set, we have our new value code, we can now go create a new value entry. So like we were saying before we started today, with the value tab, this is going to be any money involved in the case. So things that you guys are paying out, things that your firm may be receiving, all of that stuff is going to be stored here in the value tab for the specific case that you're in. Right. So you see, we already have a couple entries in this tab already. So what we're going to look at first is the various views that we have available. So this list view is just going to put it into a list format, right? We get all of them that we could then filter through. Quite a lot to filter. You can use these column headers. So if you want to see the newest ones, you can click it 2 times and you get the ones from, today. Or if you want the oldest ones, you can get the oldest ones. It's up to you. These column headers are all user specific. So if I choose from, nobody else will have that same filter set unless they do it as well. But you can look at this value tab or all of these entries through a grouped view, which will group it by the code. So if we wanted to see all of the case expenses and what's due for all of those case expenses, it groups them together for us. Subrogation, due to firm entries, lost wages, medical bills, all that stuff. Another view, and personally one of my favorite, is going to be the settlement view, because this gives you a full settlement breakdown without actually having to generate a settlement memo. So you see that you have your settlement or recovery here at the top. You have your due to firm entries. So all of those case expenses that you guys paid throughout the course of the case, referencing that it's now due back to the firm. And then we have all of those other providers that need to be paid: medical bills, referral fees, attorney fees, fines, time, trust, all that. And we get a breakdown for those entries as well. And at the very bottom, we get our deductions, what's due to the client, if there was any payments already paid to that client, and what's due after the payment. So again, it allows you to get the settlement breakdown without having to actually generate the settlement memo. Okay. Again, these views are all personal preference. However you want to view the value tab is going to stick for your user profile. There is one more view, I guess one more view. It's called Subtotals. And this Subtotals here is kind of like the grouped view, where it groups it by the code, except you can't open these codes up, right? But you do get a full breakdown or sum at the bottom as well. This Subtotals page will also allow you to print that. Now, so those are the major ways or the main ways that you can view this value tab. Now, what we're going to get into is actually how to create one of these value entries. So there's a couple things that we can do. We can go directly in here to add, and that will then populate this value entry field for us. So like we were saying, the value tab is going to house case expenses, medical bills, and those things. So for today, we're going to say, I don't know, we did a police report. Okay. So our value code would be a case expense because that's something that we're paying out on behalf of the client that we need to be reimbursed for. As you see, if we do go down, we should have that recovery that we just created though. If we choose case expense, for today, we're going to say it was $25. Okay, click on the correct keyboard. Now, if there was a reduction to that bill, we can put that reduction in. And of course, we want to make sure that we're linking the value entries to the party that it applies to. All right. By default, it should default to your client and or the plaintiff, depending on the party that's in the case. But it should be your client. And then your provider here is the contact that charged this amount. All right. And I know you guys have heard me say provider this whole time. Provider just means contact. All right. It's not solely medical providers. It's not your hospitals. It's not chiropractors. It's going to be attorneys, judges, court reporters. It will be hospitals, doctors, and chiropractors. But this is a very broad, encompassing term. Okay. It's contacts. So since we said police report, I'll search for a police department. And you see we have all the various police departments that are already put into NEOS. Now, if we wanted, and they're not in this list, we can always add a new contact. But for today, we're just going to use this first one. Right. So now that we filled in what type of value entry it is, what the amount was, and who charged that amount, we now have this detail section about the value entry itself. So you have a memo field that you can type in any memo regarding this value entry. You have a settlement note field. So if this entry is a settlement, you want to add a note to it, you can do that. And you can use this category to categorize what type of value entry this is. So since we said it was police report, we can find police report. A lot of this is going to be for reporting purposes. Very important. The more information we have, the better those reports will be. And you guys will remember, these are those two reference fields that we were talking about before. So you can actually rename them to allow you to store the information that you want into those fields.
So in saying that, Devin, I've got two questions real quick. In fact, one of the questions is in reference to that. Christopher asked, did I hear that correctly, that on the value screen, we can rename a column to check number? So on the columns on the main value screen.
Let me save this really quick. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
And you mean these columns here at the top?
That is correct.
All right, so that is, if I'm not mistaken, it's going to still keep the original name.
Reference one.
Reference
But that
one.
would be the check number if we put that in there for it, or the invoice, as you had stated earlier when you were setting that up in the settings.
Exactly.
Correct. Christopher, I hope that answers your question. I have one more question from Mr. Steve Miller. How did the settlement amount get entered in as a credit?
Okay, so that's all based on the setup. So you remember when we were looking at the codes here in our mini directories? So you'll see if we go back down to value codes, through the settlement item, it's automatically labeled as a credit. So when I go to put that settlement entry in there, it already knows that we're tracking against that settlement amount. So it's going to track your attorney's fees, case expenses, and everything else against that credit entry.
So please stay right there, because the next question, do you add value categories the same way as you add value codes from Kaylin May?
So right above it here on the left, you have value categories. So yes, you would add them the same way, but they are their own separate mini directory. Okay, so just a little tip or a heads up for you guys. Typically, whenever you want to add something, it's found through the top right. All right, and we can type in whatever we would like. Let's see, because I'm pretty sure this one's pretty built out already. Just for today's purposes, we'll just say test for now, just to show you guys how that works. So if I add that value category here, you just open up a case expense. We may have to create a new one. Yeah, it's already filled in. Okay, no worries. Let me go filter by my dates. And we now have that new value category. So we're good to go. All right. So we were talking about the reference labels. Let me go back to that initial case expense really quick. Yes. Okay. So this UTBMS expense is the uniform trial. Here, can you remember what that acronym stands for? I cannot remember off the top of my head, but I know it's for time tracking, and there are specific expenses that are already built out based on this system.
Uniform task-based management system.
There it is. I couldn't remember the name. So these codes are already built out on that. Sorry, it's kind of cutting it off. Give me 1 second. I want to make this just a bit smaller. So of course it's going to. There we go. You can see the items here on the right-hand side and what these codes are for. And if I'm not mistaken, unless it was taken out, we'll have to check on that to see, just to see if those codes, because I know it's based on a standard set of items. Now your bill to should match the party that this case expense is tracking against, which again, by default, will pull your client. You have your service dates, the date that the report was requested, and also the date that that provider requested their payment. So if we did this today, they requested their payment today, we can now save. All right, so we've got our value entry, what it is, what the amount is, and who charged it. We've got the details regarding this value entry. And we now have 2 sections down here at the bottom. So transactions and notes. So this transactions is kind of like what we were talking about before. We all know case expenses, again, something you guys pay out for your client that you need to be reimbursed for. And using the transactions is how you are going to reference that or create that, that entry that will reference that it's due back to the firm. So we paid this $25 to the police department for that police report, and we're going to reference that here in our transactions. So when I click on this plus sign, I can fill in what amount was paid. Again, correct keyboard. We can choose the type if it's a payment or an adjustment. It's not an adjustment. They're not adjusting the $25 police report bill. But medical bill situation, they may adjust it. This is how we can do that. You have your transaction dates. And then like we saw before, by default, the code is going to fill this in for you. If it's a case expense, it's a debit. If it's something like settlement, it's a credit. All right. And then who was it paid by? By default, case expense, it was paid by us, the firm. And it was paid to the provider that's filled into the value entry. All right. Fund ties into law pay. If you don't have law pay, don't worry about it. And again, if you do, you'll have a session dedicated to that. And reference. So if you don't have QuickBooks, you can use this reference label for whatever you would like. If you do have QuickBooks, this is where your check number is going to go. But again, we have a dedicated session to QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop that whichever one you use, you will have that session and walk through the whole permissions, setting the integration up, requesting, checking all that. Right. And so you see here at the bottom, we do have QuickBooks integrated, so we can create a check request, but we're going to turn that off for today. And we can create a due to firm entry. So that's what I have been saying all morning. All right. Whenever you pay that case expense out, you need to make sure that this little toggle button or radio button is turned on. All right. Because if not, you essentially have just identified that you paid $25 for the client and you are not going to be reimbursed for that. It is not going to pull into that settlement memo. Very important. All right. So we can save. Now, really quick, not to go down a rabbit hole, this save and add another, typically in a situation where I see it used is like medical bills. Client pays their deductible, but there's still $1,500 left on the bill, right? So we save, we add insurance as payment right behind it. Okay. But for today, we're just going to create the due to firm and save. So now, really quick, we are going to come back right to this entry. But if I click the arrow next to value entry and filter by my date, I have that case expense for the provider being the police department. And then I have that exact same due to firm with that $25 due to our law firm. This is our test law firm name. Just so you know, this would be your law firm's name. So we paid that case expense in $25. So $0 is due to the police department, but $25 is due to your law firm. Okay. So that's kind of how case expenses and due to firms work.
Awesome. Got a second for another question?
Yeah, for sure.
Terry Shuttleworth asks, how come when I enter a settlement amount and then go to add a transaction to create the deposit, it won't let me choose credit until I change the type to adjustment?
We may have to check your code setup to make sure that it's pulling correctly. And we also may have to check that paid by as well. You're creating, Terry, really quick, you're trying to do a deposit request for QuickBooks?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that's gonna take some admin setup on the paid by within the mini directories. So who are you choosing in the paid by section? Is it like liability? Yeah.
Yes.
So we would want to make sure that that liability provider is also set to a credit within the mini directories. Just to show you what I'm talking about really quick. We open up our settings and go to mini directories. There is this paid, where is it? Paid by. You want to make sure that that liability is also set to credit. That's what's then going to give you deposit request at the bottom. Really quick, Lori, I see your question as well. The reason for that is, more so like transparency, always tracking the initial case expense. If it ever gets brought up again, you can always reference back to what that initial case expense was. Now,
And Ashley, I see your question. Sorry, Ashley, I see
Oh.
your question. I promise you, we will get to it.
So yeah, it allows you to essentially just track all of those initial entries and reference back to them if you need it. Yeah. Let's see.
All right. You want to
Actually, if
kick
we
back
choose
up and start going again?
really quick, because it looks like we have some tied into this as well. Adjustment on a medical bill, often it gets reset. If we choose adjustment before paid by, can we fix that?
So Ashley Darrow asked, if we choose adjustment on a medical bill, oftentimes it gets reset. If we choose adjustment before paid by, can we fix that? Reset to payment.
Like that?
Yes.
Yeah. That's, I can check on that, but that I'm pretty sure is again going to tie into that paid by section, but it shouldn't. Adjustment. Let me say.
And it may be by design that it's set that way.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well, because there's not really a way to identify what this paid by would set the type as, if that makes sense.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Paid by determines what check or deposit request we get, but not necessarily like the type that shows up. But I can check on that. Let me just make a note really quick.
Sure. And Charles Lars asked, I may be jumping the gun, but can the settlement memo format be edited and made custom? We're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes, Charles. So please, we will cover that.
Credit card payments for invoices, case expenses for medical records. Kim, can you expand on the credit card payments just a bit?
And Devin, we may move on, keep moving forward, and then can answer these a little bit more toward the end once we have a little bit more time.
Oh. So we were talking about our transactions. Let me go back to our actual entry. 1 second. So with this case expense entry, we created the transaction. We also have this notes section as well. And through this notes section is how you can add notes specific to this value entry itself. So you'll see when you click the plus sign, every note has to have a topic. All right, just like within the notes tab itself, because I know that there are some people that are currently using needles on this call, and I'm sure you guys know if it's not in notes, it did not happen. Nothing changes there. So choosing a topic here, let's see if we have anything regarding value. We don't, but that's okay. Anyway, please. I don't think so. Yeah, this is what we'll use. So we'll say injuries, medical. We'll say, oh my goodness, I could spell today. Goodness. Now, you can also add attachments here. So if you have like the actual invoice document or the bill, you can click add, and that will allow you to bring that document in, say from your desktop or your downloads, a folder that you can access. Now, if I click save, not only does it save that note to this value entry itself, as you see, we're still here in the value tab, but it will also post any note that we save here to the notes tab. Okay. If you don't want to search through the list, we do have a value category, which will house all of the value notes. So you can see case expenses, attorney's fees due to firm, subrogation, and all those other ones. So I see we have some more questions.
Yeah, Kim asked, I want to pay using a credit card instead of a check.
Okay. In that situation in the value tab, I mean, you can use, it's more so this is going to be a firm decision. You can leave reference 1 open or reference 2 open, and you can type in like credit card, paid by credit card or something like that, but there's not really a like specific credit card section. Does that make sense?
Okay. Is there a way to turn off the automatic posting of a value note into the notes? This automatic copying of every value note into the notes is resulting in way too many notes to sort through.
Unfortunately, no. By design, those value notes automatically post to the notes tab.
That is correct. They automatically go. All right. Chris asked again, my liability is set to credit and it still wants it to be an adjustment in order to give me the availability to get the check request option.
Here, give me 1 second. Let me go through this really quick. So if I go in here and I set my paid by liability to credit, let me save. If I go
And
back
Chris,
to that
if you
case,
saw that setting there, that paid by liability, and we changed liability to credit rather than debit.
what he's saying is set. So now if I go in here to value, what I should be able to do on my settlement amount, create my transaction. It was 400. Oh my goodness. Pay by that liability carrier to client. I see what you're saying. Yeah, by default, it automatically sets it to adjustment.
And that's when it's changing that paid by even earlier. I believe that was something that someone else had already asked earlier, is the same thing. When you change that, it automatically changes that to payment, not adjustment. Yeah. Even if they set it as an adjustment, it's still by design to change it to payment. And that's one of the things that we can talk to product 2 about.
I can understand that one right there for sure.
When you change the type from adjustment to payment, the deposit request disappears.
That's something that we have to check into to see what's going on there, because this, once we choose the liability, that's like you said, that's when you get that deposit request, but that type should be set to payment.
Correct.
So let me just make a note of that really quick and we'll let our team know. Because you are right, that create deposit request should stay on and this payment should fill in. So let us send that up to them and we'll look into that.
So we'll definitely get you an answer.
Now, also, that was Chris, right? Do you have QuickBooks connected and everything as well to your company file? You have the integration set up and the integrator?
I don't see it yet. Steve Miller asked, are the contents of the notes searchable by word?
From the notes tab, yes.
I was going to say from the notes tab, it is, yes.
Right here in the search box. You type in any keywords that you have, and then it will search for any notes that have that word or words in it.
Correct. Chris did respond and said, yes, I have it. Great, thanks. What I have to do instead is set it to adjustment, do the deposit request, and then come back and change the adjustment to payment. And it's all fine then.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that that's something that we have also mentioned as well that's currently being looked into when it comes to specific settlement deposit requests. So we are looking into that as well.
Terry, I see that you asked the same question. Hopefully that's the answer, or you heard the answer for the adjustment payment issue.
Yeah. Yes.
Going up, talk about Charles Lars. I may be jumping the gun, but can the settlement memo format be edited and made custom?
Sorry, I think I completely missed that one. Not really. So these settlement memos that come with NEOs are more so of canned reports, right? So we have this list here. I definitely recommend like the standard one. You'll see if I click on the three dots to the right, I can download it as PDF or Word, but even in Word, it's set to tables. So we're very limited in what we're able to do within those tables because these are still considered standard reports that came with NEOs.
So also I want to look at, if we go to settings and firm preferences and adding words to their settlement memo there.
So you guys see this little paragraph here, this language.
Mm-hmm.
If you have your own specific settlement memo or the language that you use, you can copy it into your settings and into firm preferences. All right. There's a section in your firm preferences called settlement memo. And you can just paste that directly into this box.
Correct.
All right. So that way, whenever you run a settlement memo, it automatically pulls the language that you and your firm use into any one that you want.
All right. The next question from Terry is it possible to not create a DTF until the bill is actually paid in QuickBooks? Just because someone requests a check doesn't mean it's paid immediately.
Yeah, Terry, I think we worked on this a couple weeks ago. Because if I'm not mistaken, when we go in there let me start this from scratch, just to kind of refresh my memory really quick. Sorry, guys, 1 second. Case expense for medical records. So if we say 30 bucks, payment paid by us, we don't want to do the firm. We do want the check request. We save, good to go. Now, if I come back in here. Okay, so I mean, yeah, you could, if you just turn that due to firm entry off when you do it. Let me go double check, make sure I'm not lying. Yeah, okay. So Terry, what you would do in a situation like that, you would create your entry, you would create the transaction to do the check request, but you turn that due to firm entry off. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So again, case expense, we fill in the amount. I'm just putting in different numbers so that way we can quickly see. We'll pull it up to a different police department, BH. All right. So what we'll do, we'll create that transaction to get the check request. So it will be $50. We got our check request, but what you're going to do here is turn that create due to firm off.
So then her add-on to that question is, but then when it does get paid, she would have to go back into there and turn the DTF back on. That is correct. And save it again. That is correct. Because that's still a due to firm expense. Not that it got paid immediately or anything, but it's still due to the firm because the firm paid it out or will have paid it out.
Ashley, our VT notes also populate in the main notes section, but we have to type in the provider we are making the notes on since they don't carry over into the main notes tab. Anything we can do to have the provider name reflected in the main notes. Are you talking about the provider here? Like in the actual value entry?
So Ashley, are you talking about, can you make that entry there or go to the one that you had just made in the notes tab, Devin, and let's take a look and see if that brought in the provider.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So
It
you want
doesn't
to
say what
essentially
provider
identify,
we're notating.
right? You want to know who that provider is that pulled over
Correct.
from that value item.
Correct.
Really, the only way I would say would be when you're creating the value note to add that provider's name in there.
I was going to say that would be the only way. Yeah.
Because by default, there's really no other option or no other way to do so.
That's what they've been doing. So that is correct. Terry Shuttleworth came back and said it would be helpful if it wasn't like that. As a staff member, staff members like to go in there to see if an invoice is paid. So she's saying when the in the value tab.
Yeah, but unfortunately by design, that's the way Neos is set up. We do have our ideas page though. So any ideas that you guys would feel make Neos better, definitely submit those. We'll show you guys towards the end today where we can find that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say we can definitely look at that too.
For sure, because the ideas page is going to be our best option based on the voting system. The more votes you get, the better it is. So we'll talk about it.
Is there anything else you wanted to look at or cover? I think we covered everything on the agenda, Devin.
Yes, we have. Are there any questions regarding anything that we've looked at today? Oh, let's see, we got one.
Jennifer Lloyd asked, are you using payment requested on the value entry screen to show that was billed in the columns?
Are you using payment request on the value entry screen to show what was billed in the columns? Really quick here. The payment requested is more so of a date. So when we were in that case expense entry, you're talking about this payment requested here. Is that what you're asking me?
They want to see it in the columns as billed.
Right. Okay. So essentially that's just going to pull the date. That's all that's going to do.
It's not going to mark it as billed or not billed or
Right.
anything like that. There's not a checkbox per se.
Right. Now, paid would show you if there was an amount paid, what the amount was. Right. If there was a reduction, what the reduction was.
Right.
Right. So you'll see like the amounts for the, what was it, the date, payment date, right? Something like that. Billed. That would be more so if it was billed. Lean checkbox into the subtotals. So the items that pull into the subtotals, the leans would pull more so either like subrogation, or we go create a lean value code that we could create their own separate entries. I know what you mean for like medical bills and stuff like that, but in theory, really the leans, I don't think it got taken out. I would say we should create our own separate value code and item for leans, because that's what's going to make it pull into the subtotals, not this little checkbox, if that makes sense. Okay, whenever I create a case expense and got back into add the transaction to populate the due to firm, the provider category does not fill in. Am I doing something incorrectly? So Whitney, no, you're not doing anything incorrectly. By design, that's a very broad term, okay? So you create the case expense, you create the transaction like you did, and all that provider field is saying is that this provider is this entity or person. It's the provider from the initial value item. Does that answer the question? Printing the value screen.
Can we print the value screen?
There's a couple different ways that we're able to do this. So when we were in that subtotals, by design, we get a print of the subtotals page. Now, if you don't want the subtotals, you can either print the list view or the grouped view. You cannot print the settlement view. Okay, and to print those, over here to the right from this actions drop down, you will print.
The next one, can you show us how to run an attorney fee summary report so we can use an attachment for fee affidavits?
All right, that's going to tie into specific settlement memos. We really would have to figure out which one's going to work best for you through this list. Something like settlement memo with attorney's fees or something like that. But it's really going to take some, identifying what's going to work best for you guys.
So Laura, you can definitely schedule some time with your trainer and go over any of those report questions that you guys may have and see if they can't help you and get those things done. Kim, is there a way to generate a report such as case expenses only or medical by specific code with a to and from date without going into reports?
It would be in reports.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna have to go into the reports for that.
The only reports that we get directly from this case are going to be settlement memos or case facts, which are essentially going to be like notes, dates, stuff like that.
Correct. Laura Ranson, can you please show how we can tell which DTF items have been reimbursed to the firm or not? Sometimes we have clients that have multiple settlements and we want to show which DTFs are still due versus already reimbursed.
Laura, if I'm not mistaken, are you guys bypassing the case expense and just creating due to firm entries? I can remember correctly.
No, we use the normal DTF creation.
Yeah, because that's going to take a couple more questions that's going into that. Like, how are you guys identifying which ones have been paid compared to which ones haven't? And that's going to add a whole different kind of conversation. Laura, if you want, shoot me an email and we can talk separately about that.
And that email is devin@assemblysoftware.com.
Laura knows. We've worked many times.
Okay, then are we able to create a medical, add a transaction of paid by lien and auto enter it under the lien code? We're trying to track medicals and liens separately.
Yep. They would just be, like you said, their own separate individual entries. So what we would have to do, most likely, we create a value code of lien, and then we create that paid, or create a medical, like you said, create a medical bill.
Right.
And then we create the paid by as a lien. So all we
Medicare or Medicaid, something like that, that pays that, and then we make that payment the lien, and that's what comes out. Actually, hopefully that answers what your question is. So you see the $100,000 bill from JFK Medical Center, but it zeroes out because Medicare paid the $100,000, and then you have Medicare with a $100,000 lien because they paid that bill.
Oh, Christopher, that would be awesome. Auto expanding columns to match the resolution of your computer. So that is definitely something I would say we should submit through the ideas page.
Through the idea panel. Do me a favor, Devin, real quick. Would you go to the idea panel real quick? Because we are getting under 10 minutes here. So I don't want to miss out on something like that. If you guys have something that you think would benefit the program better, that's what we want to see. That's what we want to hear from. So when you click on that question mark in the help in NEOS, that ideas and enhancements right there in the middle. Right there. If you click on it, and you can add a new idea, and then it'll send you a link that you can have everybody go and vote on that item. That's what we want to see from everybody. They do pay attention to it. And again, if you've got 2 votes, 6 votes, 1 vote, 100, 1,000 votes, it's going to get attention. Once you create it, I was going to say, once you create it, automatically gives you 1 vote. So you want to get others out there also and get them voting for those items too.
Yeah. And this is also what we're currently looking at are ideas that have currently been submitted by other users. So other firms that are currently using NEOS. So you guys are more than welcome to come in here and vote on any ideas that other users have submitted.
I'm going to Whitney Dorman. When I go back into look at a DTF, it fills in another case as a provider, not the provider from the initial case expense. It might be a bug in our NEOS.
DTF fills in another case as a provider. Yeah, Whitney, I would definitely submit that over to support.
Because I've never heard of that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I haven't seen or heard that.
Steve, if 2 or more referral fees to other attorneys are paid, are the individual payments and attorney names included on separate lines of the settlement statement, as long as you put the separate attorneys as separate providers? So you'll see. Let me really quick just kind of bring this back. I got so much stuff open. Give me 1 second. Go to downloads. If I open up this settlement memo that we did, you'll see how it's pulling that provider's name. So as long as you put in who that provider or that law firm, attorney, whatever it may be that you're paying the attorney's fees out to, it will pull in as separate line items.
Kaylin may ask, is it possible to pull a value report only for paid to client value entries from the value tab, or does this need to be pulled from the reports tab?
It's going to be a reports tab. So the only reports that we get here in the value tab are going to be settlement memos.
Correct.
Not actual like value reports.
Those would be in your reports tab.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley asks, so do we have to manually enter that lien code? No automation is possible.
So really quick, Ashley, what I'm talking about with this, am I currently like on what you would say? So like the medical bill we received was $1,500, right? Provider was the hospital, JFK. Now, if I save this, essentially what you want to be able, I just want to make sure that I'm completely understanding what you're asking here. In this transaction section, you want to identify that it was paid by a lien.
I'm just waiting on her response.
Yeah.
And real quick, can you, Lori Schmidt asked, can you choose which value entries to use for settlement memo?
Not really. Again, it ties back
All
into like
value
canned
entries.
reports, right? It's going to pull them all.
It's going to pull them all. Now, again, you could put it in .docx and take some of those things out. Of course, it's going to throw your numbers, so you'd want to update those numbers and those things. But I definitely wouldn't suggest doing that.
Natasha, unfortunately, no. Again, ties into these are standard or canned reports that come with NEOS, so we don't really get much customization options with the settlement memos or settlement
the only thing you could do with that is down, like we saw in the firm preferences settlement memo, put in their date of incident and have X's, and then you would have to fill it in a .docx. There's no way to pull in bookmarks into those canned reports. Ashley. Real quick. So we have to manually enter that lien code. No automation is possible. So when you enter that lien for that $1,500, is that what you're talking about? I don't know, Devin.
No worries. I'm getting information. I'll reach out separately.
Okay.
Question answered.
So Devin will reach out with you, Ashley.
Get that
Devin,
yeah.
I'm going to stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Yep. Okay, let me stop the share. Go ahead.
Please, everyone, thank you for coming. We do appreciate everyone's attendance. That's what makes this worth it for us. That's why we do these things, to go over these things and answer these questions and get these things for everybody. If you have questions, please reach out to us. If you sign up for the next one, please, here's the websites that you can definitely sign up and take advantage of these academies. They're here for you. That's why they're here. That's why we do them. is to put it on for everybody. So please, we encourage all the questions. We encourage attendance. If we can get, everybody from the firm that can attend that day, attend that academy, that's what we definitely want. We went through all the questions, concerns. All right, we'll leave this up for the next 2 minutes. We are at 12:58. 2 minutes if there's any other last minute questions. Again, we can't thank everyone enough for being in attendance today with us, and look forward to seeing everybody at the very next one. The next one is going to be on September 7th. No, I'm sorry, September 5th. September 5th, and that may be adjusted because of the holiday being on September 4th. So it may be September 12th. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Lindsay asks, is there a way to get a list for all these types of trainings? Yes, if you go to assemblysoftware.com, under customers, I think it is, it'll have Neos Academy, and it has our whole schedule for the next, I think for the rest of the year. I'm just going now. So if you go to customers, go to Neos Academy, we've got the value tab. We've got reporting on September 12th. So they do have it moved to the 12th. So it will be September 12th. October 3rd is going to be communication. November 7th is going to be templates and document creation. And then December 5th is going to be document management. And then they also have January, February. Yep, January and February. So we're booked through February. So please feel free to go out to the website, again, assemblysoftware.com, click on customers, go to Neos Academy, and it lists all of the academies. And we can't thank everybody enough for their attendance.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thanks again, and we'll see everybody soon. Be well, everyone.